I'll record. Right. Okay. Hello. Thank you for being here. As some of you know, we have been doing the series. This is our last one of our case study, so very excited. G and I are very passionate about this, and we're very lucky that Jen was able to join us because she's amazing and she's a super busy lady. So super happy that she's here with us today. We'll just do quick intros and then we'll kind of get started on some questions that we have for Jen. We'll go back and forth. And if you do have any questions, feel free to ask away or you can ask in the chat as well. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions, okay? Perfect. So I'm Karen Medina. I've been at NAV for about 4 years, a little bit over 4 years. I do recruiting mainly for everything but engineering. And I've been doing UX hiring since I started at NAV. So I feel like I've learned the hard way, but the best way possible, just because I've got thrown into like, let's look at all these resumes, let's look at all these portfolios. And it was awesome. It was awesome. I feel like I got really good at like, okay, this is what I'm going to look for. This is why this matters. Because before I came here, I did not know what that was, what UX was. So I was very excited to be here. So yeah, that's something really quick about me. This is why we G and I decided to do this because obviously we have passion for UX and I wanted to connect with her and work together. So very happy you're all here and welcome. I'll have G introduce herself and then I'll have Jen introduce herself.
So both Kathy and Joyce, you guys know me. For the rest who don't, my name is G. So I was a UX design bootcamp newbie and I graduated last year of May. And I landed my current role as a UX designer here at NAV at around September, I believe. It feels like it's been so long. And ever since then, I've just been helping other junior designers kind of navigate the job search just because it's rough out there. So, any help anyone can receive. And it's just been a really fun journey. And I love doing this with Karen. And I'm super excited that Jen is joining us today. So I'm going to hand it off to Jen.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Nice to meet everybody. I am Jenn Wolf. I'm the Senior Director of CX at NAV. I am stoked to be here today. I feel very passionately about the people of your team are what make you successful. So I was really excited when I saw Karen and G starting this series. In general, I love the idea behind it, and I was super excited that they invited me to talk to you all today. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. And we might, we're still getting messages of some people, so we might be getting some people coming in. Okay, so FYI. So thank you for joining. Sorry, it was a little hard for the invite. Awesome. Well, we're gonna get started with some questions. So if any of you have questions, again, right, ask in the chat or you can ask away as well. So I'll get started. So Jen, and I've talked about this before in our other sessions, and I'm looking at it here because I have my notes here, so FYI. But sometimes I've talked about how I look at the portfolio before I look at the resume sometimes, because sometimes it's a little harder, right? Because I'm like, I can teach you about NAV, I can teach you what we do, I can teach you how we work as a team, I can teach you all of that. But it's really hard for me to teach you who to be as a designer, right? So then for me, that's why I have to make sure that our portfolio, like their portfolio, aligns with what we're doing and where we want to be. So with that said, Jen, do you look at resumes first or do you look at portfolios first? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I am lucky enough that I have an awesome people partner, Karen, who goes through that first round of vetting process for me. So I tend to kind of skim a resume first, like just looking for general experience and skill set matches. But I dive into portfolio pretty quickly, and I tend to spend a bit more time with the portfolio than I do with the resume initially. Although if I'm really intrigued by the portfolio, I do go back to the resume and go deeper in.
Yeah, perfect. I tend to do that. This is why I love this, and how we were discussing. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so glad that our answers do match, because I'm like, okay, yeah, we're right. We work together well. So I'm like, I was hopeful that they match. So this is great. If not, we would have had
It was not planned. Sure. That was not planned.
I'd be like, oh, that's weird, Jen. Awesome. And then I know that for me, and lately, right, we've been getting a lot more applicants. I like the reg, sometimes it's over hundreds, right? Like of people that we see And I don't have time to see all of them. I wish I did because they're super fun. Like I really do enjoy the UX ones, but sometimes I just don't, right? And we have to move quick, and we have to hire. So how for me, and I said this, and sometimes I feel like people are like, what? But it really takes me about like 30 seconds to look at a resume, to look at a portfolio, because I have to go quick, especially when I'm in a time crunch. But how long do you spend on a resume and or a portfolio, Jen? Because I know that I try to not send you 100 people, so you have a limited amount. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I don't think I have any like specific time, although it is longer than 30 seconds, Karen. Um, so I'm really I'm going through that initial review of the resume pretty quickly, but then I'm trying to spend a bit more time in the portfolio, specifically if you're really catching my attention with the portfolio, right? So I'm going to dig in because to me, that's where I believe you can really see the person come to life, right? Like that's your portfolio is kind of like the designer's soul, I feel like in some ways, like laid out for you. So I will spend a bit of time with the portfolio, going pretty deep there.
Sweet. Okay. The next question, well, the question I wanted to ask was, so I remember in the beginning, I've built my portfolio in like 5 different platforms. And I was wondering if you had a preferred format. So whether it's a PDF, a website, a Dribble, Behance, or any other that would exist.
Yeah. This one, I think as long as it's accessible, that's like my biggest thing. When I carve out time to like sit down and really review a resume or really review a portfolio, the worst thing that can possibly happen is I try to like log in to see your work and I can't get to it, or it's like behind a password that I don't have or something like that. So I'm not really partial to any like one medium, but accessibility is really, really key. So Karen, I know you think slightly different than
I
I
have
do.
an opinion about I could not give you a PDF. I don't think I would, because I think the moment I give you a PDF, I would lose all credibility. I'd be like, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, but it doesn't do anything. So for me, I prefer. I think everything else is fair game except for a PDF. If I have time, I will reach out and be like, please send me anything else. I like your stuff, but I need something else. But if I have 500 plus, I don't have the time to stop. So I would not. I'm sorry. Cannot do
That's
it to you,
probably
Jen.
why I'm not partial, because you're already like screening that part
Exactly.
out.
That's why you have not seen a PDF. That's why you.
That's right.
This one, so the next question kind of goes hand in hand with that. I've been approached from a couple of other junior designers about free domain. So I mean, me personally, I was unemployed when looking for a job, and that's the same for a lot of people. And they're wondering if using a free domain has any negative impact, like whether you see, wix.com/name and not like a personalized domain, or even like powered by XYZ.
Yeah, I personally don't associate any negativity with any kind of free domains or anything like that. To me, that's just showing that you're cost effective. And I think I'm, especially being in the business that we're in, right, where we're trying to like help small business owners on a regular basis, they are some of the most cost effective and efficient people that I've ever seen. So I think it just marries into that whole philosophy. And I'll say that I also know there are people of all different levels of design skills that I've seen who use free tools. So I don't think that has any impact.
I love hearing you saying all that stuff, because the more I listen to you, I was like, oh, I'm like, yeah, we really are aligned. This is why we work, Jen. This is why we work together really well.
We're like this, Karen. We're like
Yeah,
this.
right. Like this, like this. G is our story right here.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with that too, because I'm like, I would not even know, right? I'm not a designer by trade, so I would not even know which ones are the expensive ones and which ones are free. So it doesn't matter. Um, Awesome. So I know for me, I look at the portfolios, but again, when I'm doing my interview, like I tell them, right? I'm like, I'm not a designer. Like I'm not a designer by trade. I'm not looking at every little detail that you have, but I do need to see specific things, right? So I do need to see And I think some of you were in the past sessions, so you've heard me say this before. But I do need to understand, right? Like, okay, what were you trying to solve? What did you do to solve that problem? And then what was your conclusion, right? Like, what did you learn from it? What came out of it? I do need to see those specific things. Like, I do need to see something, so a good story, right? A good story, so I can also help Jen and be like, Jen, I have this awesome people. Look what they've done, right? To really connect together. So with that said, what is it that you look for, Jen, in a portfolio at a high level? Maybe as I send them to you, right? What is that you're like, okay, I'm looking at this. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I think like obviously you're trying to just make sure generally that the person has like a grasp of the design skills that are needed, right? So that's like one thing. But I think that the number one thing for me personally is that I want to see that your portfolio tells a story. So Karen, like that was a perfect segue. I agree with you 100% there. I'm trying to see like what your process is, how you think, how you approach the work, and then ultimately, like, did the product or feature that you are designing, did that create measurable results? And I know that sometimes there's a question mark attached to that because you're like, what if I didn't actually put this in a market? What if I designed this, but we didn't actually roll it out or execute it? I think that it's still important to show that you've thought of what success would look like and how you would plan to measure that, even if it's something that did not get executed. I think pinpointing those kinds of metrics is important in the process and making sure that you're thinking about the success of what you're creating is key.
I actually wanted to dig into storytelling a little bit. So
Yeah.
storytelling is a word that I just see everywhere in LinkedIn when it comes to case studies, but I feel like I had a very hard time understanding what that even means in terms of a portfolio. So for you, like, what is storytelling? What are you talking about when you say it's important?
Yeah, that is an excellent follow-up question, G. I think you did a fantastic job of that in your portfolio. So I'm trying to make sure that like you are clearly laying out what your objective is when we first start, you know, like what is the point of this project or this this effort, so that the that goal in the beginning is really clear. And then I want to make sure that you're able to step through the process and kind of connect all of the pieces. So were you able to leverage research? Did you have access to research, right? Were you able to leverage that? How did those insights play into your strategy and how you were seeking to solve the customer problem? How did you work through your design process? How did you connect the metrics to that so that in the end, it's essentially a story that flows all the way through?
Sweet. Yeah, thanks for explaining that in detail. It makes more sense.
Yeah.
So my next question is, I think the biggest barrier that junior entry-level designers face is not enough experience and not having like a real world. So with someone who is new to UX, you know, just kind of graduated in the boot camp, but is a career switcher and who has a strong background in somewhere else that is transferable, like what can they do to showcase their skills, and is it relevant?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me there is that you can relate your previous experience to the current role, right? So it's going to be rare. I mean, in any role really, that you like apply for a job and are going to meet that criteria exactly one-to-one. Like you're never going to be a one-to-one match for anything. So I think what you want to do is be able to just tie that previous work into what they're looking for, and then you're going to have a win. So G, you were a great example again here. I remember when, you know, we interviewed for your design role at NAB, you came in with limited design experience specifically, but you were able to walk back through your job history and your career path and kind of connected each piece of that into how it informed your personal design philosophy and the way that you approach your work. Which ultimately to me made you the stronger candidate, right? Like I could see how every piece of your job experience really played into how you were going to accomplish your design work going forward.
And then kind of like, this goes hand in hand with my previous question, but going back to like not having real world experiences, I mean, I guess we already kind of got the answer, but I want to dig in a little bit more. Do you kind of automatically cross off like entry levels, you know, maybe has like one internship, no real world experience, and then kind of, yeah, pretty much like cross them off the list as soon as you see it? Or do we all have a chance?
I would never cross anyone off the list because they're entry level. It kind of goes back to that last question, right? Like, I think you have to be able to connect the dots and make whatever experience you do have relevant to what you're trying to do here. But I think in addition, there's a tremendous amount to be said for passion and ambition, right? So you could be the greatest designer in the world, but if you, with really, you know, true real world experience, but if you don't love what you do, then you might not be the best fit, right? Like, I think it's really about having that. A big part for me is having the drive and the passion for what you do. And I'm really lucky. I work with a team of rock stars in general. So when I'm hiring, I'm really looking for people who are going to fit into that team, right? It's a high productivity team. So to be on par with that group and to stay in the stream of work, we are really looking for candidates who are bright and skilled and who want to contribute, but who also have a hunger for continued education, right? Learning more and always pursuing improvement. So that was a very long-winded answer to say, no, I would not cross off an entry-level person.
Yeah. And I agree also, right? Because I wouldn't either, especially when, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the same as Jen, what Jen said. Because yeah, for sure, like if somebody does have passion, even if they have limited experience, like I still want to talk to them. Like I'm still hooked. I'm like, oh, tell me more. Like compared to somebody that has a lot more experience, that's, you know, boring. I don't want to say that, but just not as excited, right? Because it's so hard, especially on the rough days, because there are some rough days. Not everything is rainbows and sunshines. Sometimes there's a little bit of clouds. And that's why it's important to see that as well, because sometimes like those are the people that are going to get up and go, and it's like, hey, it's a bad time, but I love this. It's awesome. Let's keep going. Let's move it forward. So there's a lot of little things that add up to that for sure. So perfect. Awesome. So Jen, during the interview, I do again ask very specific questions because it's what you and I talk about, right? Especially when we're connecting about candidates, when I'm like, hey, this is what I heard that they told me, and this is why I decided to move them forward, because the way that they think and they talk about their work, okay? So when I ask, walk me through your workflow, right? Walk me through a case that you want to talk about. I'm not a designer, but I want to understand what you did. I'm not just asking for a 3-second intro. Like, and also if we have 30 minutes, I'm not looking for you to talk for 30 minutes, right? Like, be cautious of time. Like, I want to understand like your thought process. So, and then again, I look for, you know, what was a problem, what they did, and again, what was the outcome. So when you're asking about that question as well, because I have a strong belief that you also ask that question. What are some specific things that you are looking for, like to get out of that answer?
Yeah. So being in customer experience, I talk to a lot of people, right? I've not only interviewed candidates for work, but I also interview a lot of customers and prospects and people in general. And I find that often I learn the most when I give less structure, when I ask less structured questions and allow people to talk and explain themselves. So when I ask for like a general workflow walkthrough, I'm really looking for a few different things. So one is general thought process, right? Do you have a solid approach to your work? The next one in order there would probably be level of detail, right? Like I probably want you to go a little bit deeper than Karen does. So I want to know in depth, you know, what your experience is. So I'm looking for detail there. I want you to be detailed. And then thirdly, thinking about that process overall, like, does it fit into ours, right? Not that it needs to be a one-to-one match, but does your approach fit into how our team and organization functions from a general level? So for instance, if someone said, I don't like to collaborate during the creative process, no one has ever actually said that. But if they said that, that would probably be a pretty big red flag. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. And just like getting to know you as a designer a little bit, hearing you talk through all that is insightful.
So I remember when I was interviewing with you, you asked me this and I was stunned because this question, which is what's the most difficult part about this project? It didn't, when I originally researched the top questions asked in like UX design interviews, that question didn't come up. So when you ask that question, what are you looking for? And what pretty much what information are you trying to get by asking that question?
So I did it just to throw you off, G. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. There's a lot here about problem solving, right? So in my entire career, just like the beginning of the Zoom call, right? Nothing ever goes 100% as planned, ever, never. So the important thing there is that you're able to demonstrate flexibility and adaptability. So whatever the issue was that you came across, were you able to address the issue? Could you change course as needed? Did you ultimately make it past? Did you ultimately progress past whatever that challenge was during that process without it shaking you up too badly, right?
I forgot how I answered the question, but I guess I did okay.
You blacked out. You blacked out during that question. Awesome.
I wish I had like interviews recorded. There are some parts of your interview, G, that stick out to me so clearly, but it would be fun to go back now and like listen to that whole thing over again.
Should have recorded it too.
Yes. Awesome. And then we have one more question, I believe, and then we'll open it up. So we'll start answering some questions. So my favorite question to ask always is, talk to me about your favorite project, right? Because I want to understand like that the whole thing again. We go back to the passion, to how they like to work, to what gets the candidate excited, and why was this their specific favorite case, right? Because sometimes we do see a few cases, and I've talked about this before, where I'm like, maybe don't have 20 cases, right? Have like some strong, maybe like 5, like maybe no more than 8. I don't, that's too much, just because also you forget, right? Like you forget. Like you have to be ready to answer any question. But I do love to ask the favorite one, because I do get to see what gets them excited, what gets them happy. Specifically because of those hard days, right? Like again, like there are going to be things change and shift around. So I do want to understand, and sometimes like I even get excited too, because I'm like, oh, you're so cool. Let's just be friends right now. I just want to hire you because you're so excited. So yeah. So what does that look like for you, Jen? Like when do you ask that question, and also what is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for like for passion? Are you looking for any specific detail, like how they think, how their experience went overall? What is it that you look for in that specific question?
Yeah, so I mean, the mechanics of the role always come into play, right? But the thing that I think is going to set you above and beyond, I 100% agree, Karen, is passion first and foremost. I'm trying to see work that you're proud of and excited about, right? It provides insight into what motivates you, what type of work you generally like to do, what parts of the process you love, right? There's a whole lot of parts that go into design work. What are the pieces that really get you excited? Do you get fulfillment out of creating really beautiful user experiences? Do you take the most value out of making an impact on a specific goal? Or are you really proud of being able to overcome specific challenges in a project? So it's really an opportunity. It's meant to like give you the space to really shine and share something that you're proud of. I was saying this yesterday to Karen, like, I want you to go deep. I want you to gush. I want you to tell me all of the fantastic things that you did in this project and why it's so meaningful to you, because it lets me know, who you are as a person, as well as a designer, which I think is really, really important.
And be cautious of time too, because if you're with a
Yeah.
hiring manager, you don't need to talk about your passion for 45 minutes. You have to
Right. Yes.
balance your
wish
time,
we had
please.
that. Right. That's true.
Sometimes we can talk for hours, right? When we're passionate about something, but it's like be cautious. Be cautious of your time too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so we are gonna open it up to questions. I see something in the chat, but I haven't seen if we have any questions specifically. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's one. Let's see. And I think from here we were talking about storytelling at that point when he asked this question, and I think he's gone now, but we're still gonna try to answer it. Says you prefer to see the final product up front, followed by the story of how you got to that point.
That's an interesting question. So I think, that's a really interesting question, because I could prefer one of two ways. Like, I do think it helps to see the final product so that it kind of like frames up, the story for you going forward. Or if you want to centralize on the customer problem first, right? Like, I think either of those two work. So if you have a really like visually stimulating outcome and you want to highlight that initially, that's great.
And then for me, I would have to, I don't know, because I haven't seen that before. That's why I'm like, I'd be like a little thrown off. I wouldn't be scared, but I'd be like, what are they trying to do here? So I don't know. I guess I'm gonna see it one day and go from there. So yeah. Does anybody want to ask some questions right now? Feel free to ask away. You have Jen here, you have G, you have me. This is your time. This is your time to shine.
If no one else has questions yet, I do.
G loves to ask. I don't know what she asked, Jen. Sometimes I'm just like, okay.
I know. Gotta be ready. G's always a surprise.
Yeah.
So I ran into this problem a lot, considering like the length and how much detail we put into our case studies. How long is too long, and how much detail is too much?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. I think you have to approach it like just like you do any of your other design work, right? Like it has to be a balance. So you want to have enough visuals in there that you can keep the reader involved and kind of like engaged with your work, and you need enough context to balance that and explain right as they go. But I don't want to read for, I don't have time to read for an hour is basically what I'm saying. Like if you can high level key points or make those key points stand out in some visual way, that's much more effective than, a super, super long case study that I might not get to go through completely.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, it's less about the length and the amount of detail. It's more about the visual hierarchies and how you lay out the information, where it's easier for you to skim, but at the same time to be able to dive in for details if you want.
Absolutely. Very well said, G.
Okay.
That's cool. Also in our past session, if anybody wants to go look at it, we talked about it in our last session, so feel free to take a look if you didn't see it last time. We talked about all of that.
We got a question from Kathy. Yeah. So is there a good basic outline to use as a guide when creating the case study? She says she's the sort of person, I just need a loose outline or a guide to get it done, and completely open-ended is overwhelming for me. And that's true for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like if you can just break it out into some key pieces, right? Like the aligning on a problem is going to be key. So I start with your problem front and center, and I try to always put that, well, I'm in CX, so I try to always put everything in the frame up of the customer. So customer problem, what the overarching goal of the effort was, And then I move into strategy and everything that kind of goes into strategy. So was there research you leveraged? What were the insights that you used? How did you leverage them? Give a little bit of context for like how you actually went about thinking through that problem solving effort. I know sometimes it's helpful. I've seen people show like their kind of like card sorting, right? Like post-its of like how they approach their brainstorming efforts and things like that. Sometimes that's helpful to show like just a quick visual of what your brainstorming efforts look like. And then starting to move into like your actual like design process. And I think visuals are really helpful there in terms of like moving from like wireframes into your higher fidelity outcomes. And then finally your like key metrics at the very end.
I swear we didn't practice this, but I said something very similar. Do we? Still like the
Did you?
sticky notes are moving, and yeah, I was like, oh my god, stop right now.
I guess I have another question.
Yeah.
Is there something that you, like in case studies, is there something that you often see frequently with junior designers that you don't think is necessary? Like, you know, I keep seeing it because maybe I'm sure you're seeing a lot of boot camp people, and I myself am in, you know, wrapping up a boot camp, and you know, I think it's on the opposite end where there is no formula. It's just all, you know, it'll come together how it should. And I'm like, I don't even know where to go. I just,
Yeah.
I just have a meltdown.
Yeah. Things that I see that I don't think are worthwhile. I've seen like some like I don't know how to say this correctly, but like the explanation of the process, right? Like that part I don't really need. Like we know what the process is in general, right? Like we just need to see it demonstrated. So I think that's probably, if there was one thing I could say, like don't put any effort into that piece, is like let your work speak for you, right? To go through that process, you don't need to like call each step out.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I have a question. Sorry, it's nobody. Oh, I'm like,
Oh, you go.
do you want to ask me? Okay, I have a random question. Jen, are there some maybe good questions or questions that you prefer that candidates ask you as a hiring manager, or something that would stand out for you? Because sometimes we want to know too. It's like, what questions do you have, or if there's like any clarifying questions too? Because sometimes, like I try to help as much as I can, where I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for, but also like it's fair that like that people ask to clarify, like, okay, well, what do you mean with that? Like, is that fair for you? Is there something that would stand out? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I think that I look for, but also that I think are like going to be really helpful to you as you move into a new org potentially, right? Is like people who ask me about the org structure and how the design team is kind of centered in the org. So like, because that tells me that you're thinking about how you are going to be able to work with others that need to have important stakeholders, right? That are going to need to like have some voice and opinions into the work that you're doing, that you're thinking through that. And that you're also thinking about like how your work is going to best meet the needs of the organization as a whole, and that we're not like designing in a silo. So I think that's a key one.
I have another question. Again, as junior designers, you know, we don't have a lot of pieces or a lot of, you know, examples. And for example, what if you want to go into, say, e-commerce, but it could be like a really cool skincare product brand. You want to apply for that job, or it could be, you know, Adidas or something like that. And maybe, I guess, how specific should your portfolio samples be geared toward the industry you want to go to?
That is an excellent question, Kathy. I would say it's up to your level of interest in that role. Because to me, like and this goes for me personally too, if I am going for a new role and it's something I really, really want. It's the industry I want to be in. It's the job that I want. I'm going to put in the extra effort and do the work to make an example that is going to be completely relevant to that position. So I know we don't have time to do that for everything, right? I completely understand that, but I would say, like, you know, judge it on your interest in that particular role. And if it's the role you want, I would go all in.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of overwhelmed just getting my portfolio together because I'm working full time. I'm doing this boot camp. I'm, working on, I actually am working on a project that's through the company I work for now, which I think will be a really great case study. But, I'm in the publishing industry and I'm not 100% sure I want to stay there, but I still think it'll be a good project I can talk about.
Yeah, and you're right. Like that goes to relevancy, like being able to adapt your work for what you're talking about. So good work stands out as good work, right? So like, please don't think that you need to go and like redevelop a whole new portfolio for every job interview that you have. So I would say, like, if you have something that is adaptable and you can talk about it and break apart the pieces and demonstrate your philosophy and your process, that is fantastic. I think I was breaking out like that job in my head of like, this is the one, and then that's when I would kind of tailor it a bit more.
So
Thank
Joyce
you.
had a question. So I mean to cut you off. Joyce had a question. When is it appropriate or necessary to have a slide deck for your case study presentation instead of presenting like an actual website during an interview? And do you have a preference?
I would say, I'm thinking about how we typically do it here. I think like the website usually functions better than a slide deck. Slide decks can still work, right? So if that's what you feel comfortable with, that's okay. But I think like if you're a person who is like, I'm looking at this right without you initially. So I want to be able to like move through it, understand the story, have it all flow. So if your slide deck works that way, like that's okay. Sometimes I think it can be difficult to do that in kind of a PowerPoint presentation.
How about like specific to the interview? Let's say they submitted a website for their portfolio and then, they already interviewed with Karen. Now they're going to the second interview with you, and knowing already beforehand that they have to present a case study. So let's say 10 to 15 minutes. Is it like, do you prefer, is it necessary to have a slide deck for that presentation, or can they just use their website?
I think if you have your website set up correctly and like you have the flow, right? The story flows, you should be able to move through your website in a way that like connects that while you're on the phone with the interviewer. So I don't think you have to create a PowerPoint to demonstrate your case study, as long as your website hits those key points that you're trying to demonstrate.
It's actually good to know, because I've always been like always about slide decks. So that's actually really good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I come from an agency background where slide decks are like the method of communication. So I'm with UG, I'm like really used to having slide decks, but I don't feel like that's a necessary step if you're able to demonstrate it in what you've already created.
And that's also good for, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was gonna say that's good for me to know, because for me immediately, if I hear a deck and you as a hiring manager go back and tell me, I'm gonna call that candidate and be like, no, this is not what we agreed. This is not what we agreed. You had your website, that's what you had to show. Because I didn't know that was the norm either. So I'm also learning here today with us. Because I would be like, no, I'm telling you everything to get you ready for the next interview. What happened in between? What happened in between? So that's good to know. I'll make sure to bring that up also in my interviews, just to understand what that looks like for them.
Yeah, that's gonna save a lot of people a lot of time.
Yeah, right.
I had a question about presenting the case studies to you during an interview. So now, let's say for those who are just coming out of boot camp, and I guess this is more specific to Springboard, because Springboard does match you up with the internship. So let's say you come out with this, big capstone project from like beginning to end of the process. And I guess what we all fear is that it's not like a real world project. We're presenting kind of like a concept of ours. Now versus we come out with a internship, which we can present, but the problem with those internships is they're short and you're only really working on like one part of it, whether it is the UI design or the research or anything else. And I think me too, I came into the problem where I had to choose whether to present my end-to-end big project, but it's not real, versus a smaller scope, not really might be as interesting, but it's real. Which one would you prefer?
Oh, that's a hard question, G. You're not allowed to ask the really hard ones.
Right? That's what I tell her. I'm like, gee.
Yeah, that is a very difficult one. So I can tell you, like, from my opinion, it's more important to demonstrate the knowledge and skill set and process, and see that you're planning for the execution, right? So like what that goes back to that, what does success look like question. So even though like this may not have gotten rolled out, this is what the expected impact was going to be of my work, right? I was trying to solve this problem. This was my goal. This is how I got through everything. It's not a bad idea if you are presenting a capstone to also include the work that you did in real life, even if it was like a smaller piece, just as a backup so that they can like see, some real world experience. But I do think it's helpful to see the more of that like end-to-end flow as your focused case study.
That makes sense. Because for those who don't know, I presented my end-to-end too. But I think Lillian has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to G's question because I had something similar in mind during the interview process. Because I'm a career transitioner, I felt myself sort of drawing a lot of experiences from my past career. And I think you touched on this earlier, Jen, about just making it relevant to the employer. But I also feel this kind of insecurity of using just my limited design experience as examples over and over again. So like, can you kind of talk a bit about like, I feel like I'm going to get penalized by the hiring manager. Like, oh, this girl doesn't know what she's talking about. And like, she's only done like one project. Like, I'm not sure if she's qualified. Like, that's always the fear that's kind of in my head.
Yeah, I can understand. I think the really important thing there, Lillian, is like, don't undersell the experience that you do have, right? So like you may be limited in design experience, and it's okay to say that openly, right? Like that's all right. I think the what you're bringing to the table is all of you, not just your specific design knowledge. So being able to talk about all of your other work experience is going to be really, really helpful in terms of like how they're thinking about you as a candidate overall. And I was saying this to G the other day, like I actually remembered one of the things that stuck out to me about G in her interview, and I made sure she was okay with me sharing this before I've saying this here. But I remembered she told me that she was like a door-to-door saleswoman at one point. And I was like, no one has ever told me in a job interview for, UX or CX that they've been a door-to-door salesperson. But the reason that she did that job was because that she was working on confidence boosting. She was trying to up her skill level so that when she was presenting designs to stakeholders or executives or, anybody who had buy-in, that she had that confidence to voice her opinions and her point of view. And that connection like really rang out for me. Obviously, I still remember it now. So like, don't sell short the other experience that you do have. Just make it relatable to what you're doing in design.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah, and believe it, right? I think believe in yourself too, because I know for G, like she came out so like professional. Now we're buddies, so it's cool.
Yeah.
But she came out so professional and so strong and so specific, and I was like, oh, she scared me a little, but I liked it. I was like, okay. I'm like, she has more. So So also believe it, even if you get a little nervous, just believe that you're the best possible candidate that person is talking to at the moment, and that also goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, and for those who don't know me, understand that I'm not naturally confident. I was not confident in my job search, but you fake it till you make it, right? Because confidence is not a personality, it's not a character, it's a skill, right? Being able to exude confidence is a skill, and that's something that, like Jen said, I was looking for in a sales. So that was super motivating to me when I found out, because I'm like, oh, so I don't necessarily have to feel confident in order to exude that confidence. And so I'm just gonna fake it until I make it, and then once I make it, then I can figure out the next steps.
I feel like every time you say that, I feel catfish. I'm like, geez, don't. Obviously, it worked.
And now you're stuck with me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we had another question with I hope I don't butcher your name, Layla. I hope that's correct. But she had a question about showing work from our previous company in future interviews. So if our previous company won't let us publish our work there, so either an NDA or another contract, how can we talk about our work there in future interviews and demonstrate abilities without showing the projects we have done?
Oh, this one is so hard. And I have dealt with this personally because I've done a lot of work in the past as a consultant, and then you're very limited in what you can share and show. So I think like here, if you can try to genericize the design work that you've done in those cases to like take out any like specific branding or anything like that, that you can actually leverage the core piece of what you worked on, that's going to be important. And then the other thing that could help in this situation is at NAV, at least, we actually do a design exercise. So we'll kind of give like a homework assignment where we ask you to, do a wireframe or a quick design effort on a specific thing. And that gives people the chance to like demonstrate their abilities if they can't necessarily leverage some past work that they've done.
What I've seen in the past is that people just pull it up for me. Sometimes we're in Zoom and they're like, okay, I can't share it, but I can pull up what I did so we can go over it. So sometimes I'm like, okay, perfect, right? I'm not gonna take pictures of it. Obviously, I know it's private, but I'm just trying to understand your process. So that's worked for me. That's what we've done.
Yeah, that's a great point, Karen.
I think we have time for one more question. And if no one has any, I do. Okay, cool. So this question is less about case studies, I guess, but while you're here, I wanted to ask you, do we have a question? Oh no, I guess it's a comment. Okay. So while job searching, everyone always kept saying like network, reach out to the hiring managers and the team, like when you're in the places that you're hiring, that you're applying to. So my question to you is, does it really make that much of a difference whether someone contacted you through LinkedIn and, before they apply or before the interview and kind of like, I guess, introduce themselves? And I guess I want to tag along a second because I know I don't have a lot of time, but how important is cover letters? So it's a two-part question. Yeah.
Karen, I'm looking at you on the cover letter because that probably is more meaningful to you than me. Okay, we're in sync then. And I think like the LinkedIn kind of like pre-intro, that's a really challenging one because I think it's good. Like I'm of the philosophy that like if you can like narrow down the jobs that you are looking for, like the organizations that you really want to work for, and then work to network your way into those jobs, I think that's going to be more fruitful for everybody than if you're necessarily just like applying for job postings, right? Like we still have to do that. I do understand that. But if you are trying to like really find your next move in your career path, looking for like those top 5 organizations that you want to work at, try to network your way in there through your LinkedIn connections. And in those situations, I think it is appropriate to reach out and send an intro message. I would be cautious. Not that this has ever happened to me, but don't then send 45 messages after to say like, hey, like intro is great. But oftentimes what that person is doing in the background is pulling in a people person like Karen saying, hey, I got contacted by this person. Can you take a look and vet them? Like there's probably things happening behind the scenes, but I do think it's helpful.
I did get approached by someone. The company I work for had an open UX position, which I didn't even know about it. And this girl just kind of on LinkedIn asked to connect with me, but didn't say why or anything. And then as soon as we connected, she's like, hey, I see there's a job at Wiley in the UX division. Can you recommend me? And I'm like, I don't even know you. So that it was a real turnoff for me.
Yeah.
And I thought that's not the way to go about it.
Right. That's bold.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I don't ever do this, but I'm like, I disconnected. I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know. It just really put me off. So.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you want to go in like kind of like blasting the doors down. Like maybe a slightly softer approach of like introducing yourself and like talking about your interest in the organization. Like that, I think that's meaningful, but yeah, you have to be really tactful.
Yes, and we have 2 minutes left, so I just want to say thank you to everybody that came. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. Jen, I don't know if there's any final thought or message that you want to share with us, but I also want to say thank you as well for being here, because I know how busy you are, and it's awesome that you were able to come and give us some time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a load of fun, and I wish you all the best in your career searches going forward.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Thanks. Bye.